This is the weekly run-up on EAC News Channel. You'll look back at the past week in the Kingdom of Wonder. A very good evening to you. I am Dekanin.
The King of Cambodia, His Majesty King Norodom Sihamoni, and Her Majesty Queen Mother Norodom Moninit Sihanouk have donated $1.5 million to the Royal Government of Cambodia to go towards the mining action and demining efforts across the country.
As stated in a royal letter signed on 23 July, His Majesty King Norodom Sihamoni donated $500,000 and Her Majesty Queen Mother Norodom Moninit Sihanouk donated $1 million. In addition to providing royal support for humanitarian demining work, the King and Queen Mother also relayed their best wishes to Prime Minister Hun Sen and members of the royal government for making new achievements in the mission of the motherland and for the people. On 6 July, Prime Minister Hun Sen announced a national movement to help clear mines in Cambodia towards achieving a mine-free country by 2025. This movement welcomes the participation of people from all walks of life to make charitable donations that will help mine authorities accomplish this difficult task. Currently, Cambodia has almost 2,000 square kilometers of land that still needs to be cleared of mines, equivalent to more than 14,000 minefields. A report from the Mine Authority states that from 1992 to May 2022, nationwide demining efforts achieved more than 2.4 billion square meters of land being cleared, equivalent to more than 1 million anti-personnel mines, more than 260,000 mines, and more than 3 million explosive remnants of war. So far, there have been 65,003 victims of landmines and explosive remnants of war in Cambodia, including 4,793 women, 6,106 boys, 1,393 girls. Of the victims, 19,818 died, 9,077 survived with disabilities, and 36,108 survived with injuries. Darshana Gauchan, EAC News.
The National Assembly of Cambodia will resume the 7th preliminary session of the 6th Legislature of Thursday the 28th of July at the National Assembly building to discuss a number of important laws, including the 10th Amendment to the Constitution. EAC News reporter Darshana Gauchan has the story.
The decision to resume the plenary session was made after the President of the National Assembly of Cambodia, Heng Samrin, opened the meeting of the National Assembly Standing Committee on Monday morning. The draft constitutional law on the amendment of Articles 19.1, 89, 98, 102, 119, and 125 of the Constitution of the Kingdom of Cambodia and Article 3 and 4 of the Additional Constitution was approved by the Council of Ministers on 8 July 2022. The new draft constitution allows the party with the most seats in the National Assembly to ask the king to appoint an elite as prime minister to form the royal government through parliament, and also outlines additional procedures and the state process to form a new government in the absence of the prime minister or in the situation that the prime minister resigns. According to the Minister of Justice, Kautret, the amendments made to the Constitution were necessary to ensure the smooth functioning of state institutions and to maintain stability, peace, fill the gaps of the Constitution, and still adhere to the fundamental principles of multi-party liberal democracy, as well as the principles of the constitutional monarchy. The second paragraph of Article 151 of the Cambodian Constitution states that amendments to the Constitution shall be made by a constitutional law passed by the National Assembly by a 2/3 majority. The 6th legislature of the National Assembly is currently controlled by Cambodian People's Party MPs, who took all 125 seats of the National Assembly. Darshana Gauchan, EAC News.
The ASEAN chairman, Prime Minister Hun Sen, has denounced and expressed disappointment with the Myanmar military government following the news of the execution of 4 opposition activists. EAC News reporter Darshana Gauchan has more.
In a statement issued by the ASEAN chairman on 25 July 2022, he described the implementation of the death sentences just a week before the 55th ASEAN ministerial meeting as highly reprehensible, as it slows down progress made on the implementation of the ASEAN 5-point consensus and further underscores a gross lack of willingness to support peace efforts being made by the ASEAN chair, namely in building trust and confidence to engender a dialogue among all parties concerned in order to end violence and alleviate the suffering of the innocent people. The ASEAN chairman wrote saying that Cambodia wishes to echo the overwhelming voices within ASEAN and the international community in urging the Naypyidaw authorities to take concrete steps toward fully and effectively implementing the 5-point consensus. He said, "We strongly and urgently call on all parties concerned to desist from taking actions that would only further aggravate the crisis, hinder peaceful dialogue among all parties concerned, and endanger peace, security, and stability, not only in Myanmar but the whole region." The statement emphasizes that ASEAN remains resolved to assist Myanmar's return to normalcy and democratic transition, and to find a peaceful political solution to the current crisis through an inclusive dialogue that is Myanmar-led and Myanmar-owned, in line with the 5-point consensus and the ASEAN Charter. This is urgently needed to prevent further loss of lives and to end the suffering of the people of Myanmar, said the ASEAN chairman. On Monday, state media in Myanmar reported that Myanmar's military authorities had executed 4 opposition activists, including Kyaw Min Yu, better known as Jimmy, and former lawmaker and hip-hop artist Pyo Zia Thaw, an ally of ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi. The 2 others executed were Hla Myoy Aung and Aung Turazaw. The 4 activists had been accused of helping a civilian resistance movement that has fought the military since last year's coup and bloody crackdown on nationwide protests. The implementation of these death sentences marks the Southeast Asian nation's first executions in decades. Darshana Gauchan, EAC News.
The Ministry of Health has said until now there is no ban placed on travellers from any country around the world to enter Cambodia due to cases of monkeypox. However, the ministry still informs people to be careful and to carefully monitor the situation of passengers entering Cambodia. EAC News reporter Darshana Gauchan has further details.
The confirmation from the ministry came after a 27-year-old Nigerian man with monkeypox was found in Cambodia after he escaped a medical treatment facility in Thailand. Although there is no ban placed on international travelers from any country in the world, the ministry urges officials at international checkpoints to take a closer look at passengers entering Cambodia to see if they have any rashes or blisters on their bodies, accompanied by other symptoms such as fever, or with a history of travel from African countries where monkeypox is endemic, such as Benin, Cameroon, the Central African Republic, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Gabon, Ghana, Ivory Coast, Liberia, Nigeria, Republic of Congo, Sierra Leone, and South Sudan. In addition, travelers flying to countries where there are monkeypox cases are advised to protect themselves and avoid contact with infected animals, both dead or alive, which may be infected with the monkeypox virus. Rodents, kangaroos, and other mammals are provided as an example, and all travelers are advised to avoid eating wild game. Citizens showing abnormal or suspected symptoms should immediately report to a health professional, provide one's travel history, and report to the local authorities in a timely manner. Monkeypox is characterized by rashes, itching, blisters on the face, bodies, palms, soles of the feet, or genitals, accompanied by a fever over 38.5 degrees Celsius, headache, swollen lymph nodes, muscle and body pain, lower back pain, fatigue, or a history of travel to places where there is a recorded outbreak of the disease. The Ministry of Health advises people to be hygienic and live cleanly by regularly washing their hands, washing with soap or alcohol sanitizer, avoiding direct contact with patients or sharing materials with others, eating only well-cooked food, and keeping food hygienic and avoiding contact with animals. The ministry urges anyone with a rash accompanied by fever and other monkeypox-like symptoms to consult their nearest doctor and be isolated immediately until a clear diagnosis is made. If no symptoms are present, isolation is not required and people can resume their work normally. However, the ministry urges all to still be careful and not touch others during the 21-day follow-up period after having contact with a person who has monkeypox. The ministry also urges local authorities to continue educating people on maintaining good health and raising awareness on contagion spreading in their communities. In addition, the ministry advises health workers to protect themselves in case of suspicion of contamination and to ensure thorough inspections are taking place at the border. Darshana Gauchan, EAC News.
The King of Cambodia, His Majesty King Norodom Sihamoni, and Her Majesty Queen Mother Norodom Muniniat Sihanouk donated $1.5 million to Mine Action, which was handed over to the royal government at the Cambodian Mine Action Center on Tuesday morning. The representative of the Ministry of the Royal Palace and personal advisor to the King, Paul, handed over the royal letter and royal property of the King and Queen Mother to the representative of the royal government received by the acting Secretary of State of the Office of the Council of Ministers, Seng Tieng, the first deputy chairman of the Cambodian Mine Action and Victim Assistance Authority, Lee Thuc, and the Director General of CMAC, Heng Ratana. Mr. Paul also handed over the message of the King and Queen Mother as well as the royal property to Prime Minister Hun Sen during the handover ceremony. In the royal message, the King and Queen Mother stated that they wish Samdech Aket Mahasenapadei and His Excellencies, members of the royal government of Cambodia, new successes for the benefit of the nation and the people of Cambodia, as well as the best of luck. Prime Minister Hun Sen also presented a letter of thanks to the King and Queen Mother for providing much-needed funds to help clear mines throughout Cambodia. The Prime Minister said, in response to His Majesty's merits and the deepest humanitarian will, I and all members of the royal government bow down to His Excellency, Your Majesty the King, possessing the four blessings of the Buddha: age, class, happiness, and strength. Currently, Cambodia has almost 2,000 square kilometers of land that still needs to be cleared of mines, equivalent to more than 14,000 minefields. A report from the Mine Authority states that in 1992 to May 2022, nationwide demining efforts achieved more than 2.4 billion square meters of land being cleared, equivalent to more than 1 million anti-personnel mines, more than 260,000 mines, and more than 3 million explosive remnants of war. So far, there have been 65,003 victims of land mines and explosive remnants of war in Cambodia, including 4,793 women, 6,106 boys, 1,393 girls. Of the victims, 19,818 died, 9,077 survived with disabilities, and 36,108 survived with injuries. National Assembly President Heng Samrin has said the presence of women in politics and social affairs not only promotes women's rights and gender equality, but also makes a significant contribution to national and global development. EAC News reporter Dashana Gochin has the story.
Speaking at a meeting with a member of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Vietnam and President of the Vietnamese Women's Federation, Ms. Ha Thi Nha, at the National Assembly building on Tuesday, National Assembly President Heng Samrin said that the presence of women in the field of social and political affairs is a core force and indispensable backbone in contributing to the maintenance of peace and social order, especially in promoting socio-economic growth. The National Assembly President also congratulated Ms. Ha Thi Nha on her re-election as President of the Vietnamese Women's Federation for the 13th mandate 2022 to 2027. Ms. Ha Thi Nha briefed the National Assembly President on the past achievements of the Vietnam Women's Federation, including the good cooperation between the Cambodian Women's Association for Peace and Development, a cooperation that just ended last year, but one which the Vietnamese side is ready to sign on to once again for the next 5 years. She further stated that in Vietnam's 499-member National Assembly, there are 151 female members, equivalent to more than 30% of the whole committee. She also requested President Heng Samrin to facilitate the cooperation between Cambodian women MPs and the Vietnamese Women's Federation in exchanging experiences in the future. On behalf of the National Assembly of Cambodia, President Heng Samrin said he is pleased to welcome Ms. Ha Thi Nha and the visiting delegation to Cambodia, as this visit will definitely contribute to the strengthening of the traditional friendship, solidarity, and cooperation between the two countries. This includes a strengthening of operations in all fields between the party, state, and people of the two countries. Darshana Gulchen, EAC News.
Prime Minister Hun Sen has congratulated the 10 years of progress made by Japanese company Minabe Mitsumi, which has contributed to many achievements in Cambodia. The Prime Minister is also set to preside over the 10th anniversary of the company in Cambodia. During a meeting with Prime Minister Hun Sen at the Peace Palace in Phnom Penh on Tuesday morning, the CEO of Minabe Mitsumi Inc., Yoshihisa Kainuma, briefed the Prime Minister on the progress made by the company in Cambodia, outlining how Minabe Mitsumi has invested more than $10 million in the country over the past 10 years with a strong focus on economic value, speed, and environment. The company has installed nearly 20,000 LED bulbs, contributing to protecting the environment and reducing electricity costs by more than $1 million a year. To commemorate the 10th anniversary of the establishment of Minibi Matsumi in Cambodia, Mr. Yoshihisa invited Prime Minister Hun Sen to preside over the company's 10th anniversary celebration. The Prime Minister in turn accepted the invitation and expressed his happiness that Minibi Matsumi was successful and had been expanding its activities. On this occasion, the Prime Minister also recalled the company's history in Cambodia and the decision he had made 10 years ago to catch fish whichever comes first and build trust if they invest in Cambodia. Minibi Matsumi Inc. is a Japanese multinational corporation and manufacturer of machine parts and electronics. In 2010, the company established a subsidiary in Cambodia to produce electronics and opened production in 2011. The company employs over 9,000 people.
Russia and Ukraine signed a landmark deal to reopen Ukrainian Black Sea ports for grain exports, raising hopes that international food crisis aggravated by the Russian invasion can be eased.
The accord crowned 2 months of talks brokered by the United Nations and Turkey, which UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said were aimed at restoring Ukrainian grain exports while easing Russian grain and fertilizer shipments despite tough Western sanctions on Moscow. Russia and Ukraine, both among the world's top exporters of food, sent their defense and infrastructure ministers respectively to Istanbul for the signing ceremony, also attended by Guterres and Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan. Erdogan said the deal will help prevent famine and ease global food inflation, and called on Russia and Ukraine to end their conflict. Turkey, a NATO member that has good relations with Russia and Ukraine alike, controlled the straits leading into the Black Sea. A blockade of Ukrainian ports by Russia's Black Sea fleet, trapping tens of millions of tons of grains in silos and stranding many ships, has worsened global supply chain bottlenecks and, along with sweeping Western sanctions, stoked galloping inflation in food and energy prices around the world. Moscow has denied responsibility for the worsening food crisis, blaming instead Western sanctions for slowing its own food and fertilizer exports and Ukraine for mining the approaches to its Black Sea ports. Senior UN officials briefing reporters on Friday said the deal was expected to be fully operational in a few weeks and would restore grain shipments from the 3 reopened ports to pre-war levels of 5 million tons a month. Safe passages into and out of the ports would be guaranteed in what one official called a de facto ceasefire for the ships and facilities covered, although the word ceasefire was not in the agreement text. Though Ukraine has mined nearby offshore areas as part of its defenses against Russia's 5-month-old invasion, Ukrainian pilots would guide ships along safe channels in its territorial waters, they said. Monitored by a joint coordination center based in Istanbul, the ships would then transit the Black Sea to Turkey's Bosphorus Strait and proceed to world markets, UN officials said. The deal will be valid for 120 days but renewable and would not be expected to be stopped anytime soon.
A brief protest was staged in Yangon on Monday, 25th of July, after Myanmar's military junta executed 4 democracy activists, which is accused of helping to carry out terror acts. Video shows a dozen masked protesters risking arrest by holding the public demonstration, at which they displayed a banner reading, "We will never be frightened," and called out the names of the executed activists. There was some applause apparently from local residents as they chanted against army and coup leader General Min Aung Hlaing. After a short while, the video shows the protesters dispersing and running off. The executed men were accused of helping a civilian resistance movement that have fought the military since last year's coup and bloody crackdown on nationwide protest. Among those executed were democracy campaigner Kyaw Min Yu, better known as Jimmy, and former lawmaker and hip-hop artist Phyo Seyathaw, an ally of ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi. The 2 others executed were Lam Yo Eun and Aung Turazo. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on Myanmar expressed outrage on Monday, July 25th, after the country's ruling military executed 4 democracy activists, adding that he is fearful of what might come next. Myanmar junta has executed the activists accused of helping to carry out terror acts, it said on Monday, sparking widespread condemnation of the Southeast Asian nation's first executions in decades. Sentenced to death in closed-door trials in January and April, the men had been accused of helping a resistance movement to fight the army that seized power in a coup last year and unleashed a bloody crackdown on its opponents. Tom Andrews, UN Special Rapporteur on the human rights situation in Myanmar, said the executions prove there is no limit to the depravity of the junta. The junta is despised by most people. They have no support among the population of Myanmar, he said. So I think the message for the people inside the country is that no one is safe. There's no limit to what we will do to those who continue to oppose us. Kyaw Min Yu, 53, and Pyo Zayathaw, a 41-year-old ally of ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi, lost their appeals against the sentences in June. The two others executed were Lam Yo Ong and Ong Turathaw. Andrews said the UN has yet to confirm how the executions were conducted, although he said they may have taken place in Insan prison, which he said had absolutely horrific conditions. At least 140 people remained on death row in the country, Andrews said, and there is every indication the junta could continue conducting executions. I'm afraid that even more floodgates are now opening, he said. I'm outraged by what is happening. This is just horrific, but I'm even more fearful of what's to come.
This is just horrific, but I'm
If it's happening and you need to know about it, you'll get it all right here. EAC News brings you updates and breaking news in English across all of our platforms and channels. The EAC News app, YouTube, Facebook, Telegram, Twitter, and our website www.eacnews.asia. Join me and the rest of the EAC News team every day on your favorite channels. EAC News, Cambodia made clear.
The Council for the Development of Cambodia has approved 127 investment projects helmed by Singaporean investors as of June 2022, totaling a value of more than $1.53 billion. EAC News reporter Dashana Gojin has more details.
Speaking at a seminar on Cambodia on the afternoon of Tuesday, 26 July, the Singaporean ambassador to Cambodia, Theo Le Cheng, said that Singapore is among the 5 largest foreign investors in Cambodia, with investments covering various sectors such as real estate, energy, trade and distribution of food, consumers, education, and finance. Additionally, Cambodia and Singapore have 35 connecting flights per week. The Cambodian ambassador to Singapore, Sok Kuan, outlined Cambodia's economic diplomacy strategy 2021 to 2023, which aims to promote trade, investment, tourism, and culture to contribute to national economic development and promote Cambodia in the regional and international arena. Cambodia has been working and strengthening its efforts to promote and implement this economic diplomacy strategy to attract more investment and tourists to the country. Ambassador Sok Kuan added that Cambodia, which is one of the fastest-growing economies in Asia, had recovered from COVID-19 after successfully implementing a national vaccination campaign. As a result, economic growth in Cambodia is as high as ever. The Secretary-General of the Council for the Development of Cambodia, Sokchenda Sopia, also thanked Singaporean investors and businessmen for choosing to invest in Cambodia. He underlined that Cambodia's favorable investment environment offers a solid foundation for Singaporean investors to take advantage of the sectors of agriculture, food, services, and manufacturing. He also called for more investments to be made by Singaporean investors, which will contribute to the rapid recovery and development of the Cambodian economy. It should be noted that the Singapore Investment Project was approved by the FAC as of June 2022. It currently operates 127 projects in tourism, manufacturing, infrastructure, and other sectors, worth a total of $1.53 billion. Darshana Gauchan, EAC News.
The Secretary of State for the Ministry of Economy, Pan Paula, has said that in the strategy to recover from COVID-19, Cambodia has set three main goals: rehabilitation, reform, and strengthening of resilience to ensure Cambodia's ability to respond to future crises. EAC News reporter Anthony Ellis has further details.
Speaking at the launch of the socio-economic impact evaluation of the COVID-19 cash transfer program for poor and vulnerable households during the COVID-19 on Wednesday at the Sofitel Hotel, Secretary of State Pan Paula said that the COVID-19 crisis caused the Cambodian economy to experience a slowdown for the first time in 2020. Though this experience, the royal government has put in place a recovery strategy to ensure the reliance of the economy after the COVID-19 pandemic, especially to ensure that Cambodia remains more stable and face the future crisis. He said, "The crisis will continue. The important thing is not only to recover in the short term, but to recover and stand in the long run." In 2020, the Cambodian economy decreased by about 3%, while in 2021 it once again grew by 3%. In 2022, the national economy is estimated to grow by around 5.4%. This increase underscores the legitimacy of the royal government's anti-COVID-19 campaign, which has seen the wide-scale vaccination of communities, socio-economic rehabilitation, and the implementation of cash subsidies for poor and vulnerable families. The Under-Secretary of State of Ministry of Economy and Finance and Secretary-General of National Social Protection Council, Chon Naris, has stated that the implementation of the program to provide financial assistance to poor and vulnerable families not only helps those vulnerable groups, but also helps the wider economic as well.
ការឧបត្ថម្ភសាច់ប្រាក់នេះមួយគឺដើម្បីជួយគ្រួសារហើយប៉ុន្តែគ្រួសារដែលគាត់បានថវិកាមកគាត់មិនមែនយកថវិកាទៅទុកណាគាត់កំពុងតែមានតម្រូវការក្នុងការចំណាយអញ្ចឹងគាត់យកថវិកានេះយកទៅចំណាយនៅក្នុងសេដ្ឋកិច្ចសូមជម្រាបជូនថាមួយខែ$30 លានគឺជាទំហំទឹកប្រាក់មួយដ៏ធំហើយក្នុងប្រវត្តិសាស្ត្រកម្ពុជាយើងផងសាច់ប្រាក់នេះត្រូវបានជះចូលទៅក្នុងសេដ្ឋកិច្ចដែលបងប្អូនប្រជាពលរដ្ឋយើងលោកយកទៅចំណាយដែលគាត់ទទួលបាននេះគាត់យកទៅចំណាយនៅក្នុងសហគមន៍នៅក្នុងសេដ្ឋកិច្ចនៅតាមភូមិឃុំនៅមូលដ្ឋានដែលការចំណាយរបស់គាត់នេះវាជំរុញយន្តការសេដ្ឋកិច្ចឲ្យកាន់តែដើរហើយដើរមិនមែនតែដុំមិនមែនតែទីប្រជុំជនទៀតគឺទូទាំងប្រទេសតែម្ដង
Prime Minister Hun Sen announced that the launch of the cash aid program for the poor and vulnerable families during the fight against COVID-19 on the 24th of June 2020. The first Secretary of the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Cambodia, Benita Chanlis, has stated that the program not only protects vulnerable people but also provides evidence for studies to increase the effectiveness of social protection. The Deputy Resident Representative of the UNDP of Cambodia, Selina Datrane, said that UNDP would continue to support this mechanism. She added that over the past 25 months, the cash assistance program has helped many people to ensure the prevention of COVID-19 and has contributed to community reliance and poverty reduction. Between the 25th of June 2020 and the 24th of July 2022, the government provided more than $744 million to poor and vulnerable families during the fight against COVID-19, benefiting nearly 700,000 families and nearly 3 million people. Anthony Ellis, EAC News.
The Hust TMH Company Limited has signed a $15 million loan from the Asian Development Bank to boost Cambodia's animal feed sector by expanding DHTMA storage and processing capacity in Kampong Speu province. EAC News reporter Darshana Gauchan has more.
ADB Country Director for Cambodia, Jotsana Varma, said she hopes that through this loan, the cost of animal food will be strengthened, making the livelihoods of farmers growing feed for livestock and fish more sustainable and resilient in Cambodia. She said, Developing a supply of locally sourced high-quality and affordable food is key to protecting Cambodia's food security and reducing dependence on animal food imports. Expansion of warehousing and procurement of additional processing machines will promote efficient food production. The project will allow the company to purchase more raw materials from local smallholder owners of maize, rice, and cassava in its supply chain by facilitating a supply of quality feed for livestock and fish. Along with investments in corn storage, the project also supports the installation of dryers that can allow food to be stored longer and reduces risks posed by the weather. DeHeus Asia CEO Gabor Flui has said that through the agreement with ADB, the focus on training and knowledge sharing with the motto Global Knowledge, Regional Impact will support and accelerate the sustainable development of the animal protein supply chain in Cambodia. The Minister of Agriculture of Cambodia, Veng Sakon, has stated his high appreciation for this cooperation and said that it would provide direct benefits to growers, ranchers, and production communities. He said, "Today's milestone is another breakthrough born of a concerted effort between stakeholders to reach a credit agreement to develop a food production chain for animals that DeHeus has been actively working on, responding in time to the current increase in animal production." Technical assistance will support training for 2,000 corn farmers and 2,000 poultry farmers, who are mostly women, on climate resilience practices and financial literacy. Supporting women farmers will help strengthen their work on farms and boost their access to finance to expand their business. The transaction will be supported by the Asian Development Fund 13 private sector window through a partial guarantee solution. PSW supports private sector development in emerging markets by providing financing resources for financial products, addressing and reducing barriers to general financial access, barriers that normally hinder many private sector operations. Darshana Gauchan, EAC News.
Russia's new space chief on Tuesday signaled his country's intent to withdraw from the International Space Station after 2024, but a senior NASA official said Moscow has not communicated its intent to pull out of the 2-decade-old orbital partnership with the United States.
Of course, we will fulfill our obligations to our partners, but the decision without withdrawing from the station after 2024 has been made. Yuri Borisov, a newly appointed Director General of Russia's space agency, told Russian President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday. The US State Department on Tuesday, the 26th of July, said it was taken by surprise with Russia's announcement that it plans to pull out the International Space Station and called it an unfortunate development. State Department spokesman Ned Price told the regular news briefing the news was an unfortunate development given the critical scientific work performed at the ISS. But Robin Gantens, the director of Space Station of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, said her Russian counterparts have not communicated any such intent, as required by the intergovernmental agreement on the station. The ISS arrangement between the United States and Russia is one of the last links of the civil cooperation between the two countries, as relations have sunk to the lowest point since the Cold War over Russia began its war in Ukraine on February 24th. Still, NASA and Roscosmos, Russian space agency, have been in talks to extend Russia's participation on space station to 2030, and the White House earlier this year approved NASA's plans to continue running the orbital laboratory until then. NASA has seen Russia as critical to keeping the space station running, and the agency's officials are keeping the partnership in place to 2030, officials have previously said. A football field-sized orbital science laboratory some 250 miles or 400 kilometers from Earth, the station counts Canada, Japan and Europe space agencies as other key partners. Through Russia and the US are regarded as the outpost core stakeholders. Russian thrusters control the station's position in orbit, while an American power grid keeps the outpost running. Earlier this month, Russia and the US agreed to resume sharing astronaut flights to the space station, allowing cosmonauts to fly in American vehicles in exchange for American astronauts flying on Russia's Soyuz.
We're less than 30 minutes away from docking today. Docking scheduled for 2:05 p.m. Central Time, 3:05 p.m. Eastern Time.
The National Assembly of Cambodia has fully approved the 10th Amendment of the Cambodian Constitution after opening the 7th plenary session of the 6th legislature on Thursday, 28th July. EAC News reporter Anthony Ellis has further details.
The 105 lawmakers from the CPP voted anonymously to approve the full passage of the 10th Constitution, following debates between lawmakers and the government representative Bun Chen and Justice Minister Kot Rit. The chairman of the National Assembly's 6th Special Committee, Pan Panya, informed the President of the National Assembly that the committee fully supported the draft law without modification and requested the National Assembly to hold discussion meeting. Representative of the Royal Government, Bun Chen, said that the law is made to ensure the stability of the government and protect the well-being of people. Justice Minister Kot Rit also defended the law from allegations made from civil social organisation and 4 other political parties, saying their claims were baseless and they did not understand the law and were only refuting it from the future benefit of their own parties, not the benefit of the nation. There was no request from the MPs to discuss the draft constitution any further. The draft constitution law on the amendment of the Articles 19, 89, 98, 102, 119 and 125 of the Constitution of the Kingdom of Cambodia and Articles 3 and 4 of the additional Constitution was approved by the Council of Ministers on 8th of July 2022. After the law is passed, the National Assembly will send it to the Senate for further approval and amendment before sending it to the King for his official signature. This morning at the National Assembly, 105 members, including Prime Minister Hun Sen, took time of his busy schedule to be able to vote for the 10th Amendment. The vote was 105 for the new change. It will happen now. It will go to the Senate for the approval from the Senate. Once it has been approved from the Senate, it will then go to the King, where the King will sign off. As soon as the King signs off on it, it will take effective immediately. Anthony Ellis, National Assembly, Phnom Penh.
The Secretary of State at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the head of the Secretariat of the National Commission for Organizing the ASEAN Summits and related meetings, Lloyd David, has confirmed that U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken will be attending the upcoming 55th ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting and related meetings in Phnom Penh. EAC News reporter Dashana Gochin has more.
In addition to Secretary of State Antony Blinken, the Vice President of the European Commission, Josep Borrell Fontelles, will also be attending the ASEAN ministerial meetings. Previously, following the news that the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov would be attending the ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting and related meetings, the spokesperson for the U.S. Embassy in Cambodia, Stephanie Arzate, stated that the U.S. remains committed to the success of ASEAN, but it should not be business as usual for Russia's participation in the ministerials, given Russia's unprovoked and illegal war of aggression against Ukraine. The U.S. is one of the 11 dialogue partners of ASEAN and is also a member of the East Asia Summit and the ASEAN Regional Forum. The 55th ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting and related meetings will be held from 31st July to 6th August 2022 in Cambodia. Delegates attending the 55th ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting and related meetings will be from a total of 39 different countries, including Cambodia. There will be 27 countries participating in the ASEAN Regional Forum and 12 ASEAN guest delegations. Darshana Gauchan, EAC News.
The Minister of Justice Kai Rit has responded to the 4 parties that submitted a petition to the National Assembly to repeal the 10th Constitutional Amendment, saying that these parties do not understand the law and are acting for their own future benefit. EAC News reporter Anthony Ellis has more.
Speaking at the National Assembly in defence of the 10th Constitutional Amendment on Thursday morning, Minister Kai Rit said that the amendment protects the principles of multi-party democracy and guarantees the spirit of the 1993 Constitution is further enhanced. He added the response to the 4 parties demanding to repeal the constitutional amendment, saying that they were only looking at their own benefit. He said, therefore, the declaration of the 4 parties that they do not support the 10th Amendment of the Constitution, it is normal, but it is not based on the protection of the parliamentary or multi-party liberal democracy, only to protect our own interests in the future. The National Assembly of Cambodia has fully approved the 10th Amendment of the Cambodian Constitution after opening the 7th preliminary session of the 6th Legislature on Thursday, 28th of July 2022. All 105 lawmakers from the CPP voted anonymously to approve the full passage of the 10th Constitution. After the law is passed, the National Assembly will send it to the Senate for the further approval and amendment before sending it to the King for his official signature. Anthony Ellis, EAC News.
There have been more than 18,000 cases of monkeypox reported globally from 78 countries, with the majority in Europe, the World Health Organization said on Wednesday, 27th of July.
The WHO declared the outbreak a global health emergency on Saturday, 23rd July. So far, 98% of cases outside the countries in Africa where the virus is endemic have been reported in men who have sex with men, the WHO said. Its Director General, Dr. Tedros, urged that group to consider reducing numbers of sexual partners and swapping contact details with any new partners. This is an outbreak that can be stopped. The best way to do that is to reduce the risk of exposure, Tedros told a news conference from Geneva. That means making safe choices for yourself and others. The UN agency is recommending vaccination for high-risk groups, including men who have sex with men, with multiple sexual partners, and healthcare workers. It cautioned that it takes several weeks after getting the second dose of the vaccine to be fully protected, so people should take other precautions until that point. Around 10% of patients have been hospitalized in the current outbreak, and 5 have died, all of them in Africa, the WHO said. Monkeypox has been a globally neglected public health problem in parts of Africa for decades, but cases began to be reported outside countries where it is endemic in May. It generally causes mild to moderate symptoms, including fever, fatigue, and painful skin lesions that resolve within a few weeks. Tedros said there were about 16 million doses of approved vaccine available, but only in bulk, so it would take several months to get them into vials. The WHO is urging countries with stockpiles to share vaccines while supply is constrained, he added.
Number of sexual partners.
The President of the National Assembly of Cambodia, Heng Samrin, has celebrated the achievement of signing a Memorandum of Understanding on the Cooperation Program between Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos for the 2020-2023 period. He said he is optimistic that Cambodia and Vietnam will continue implementing this MOU into practical activities and achievements for the benefit of both nations. EAC News reporter Dashana Gochin has the details.
During a meeting with the Party Central Committee Secretary and Chairman of the Central Committee of the Vietnam Fatherland Front, Do Van Chien, at the National Assembly building in Phnom Penh, National Assembly President Heng Samrin said the Vietnam Fatherland Front delegation has continued to promote friendly relations, traditional solidarity, and good cooperation between Cambodia and Vietnam, which has existed for a long time, particularly between the United Front for the Development of Motherland Cambodia and the Vietnam Fatherland Front. On the occasion, Do Van Chien congratulated Cambodia on its success in organizing the 5th Mandate Commune Sangkat Council election and praised the efforts of the royal government of Cambodia in launching effective measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19. He also praised the growing friendship and cooperation between the two countries, despite all the difficult circumstances brought on by the global pandemic. He noted that the trade volume between Cambodia and Vietnam reached $9 billion in 2021 and added that he hopes it will reach $12 billion in 2022. National Assembly President Heng Samrin emphasized that the traditional friendship, solidarity, good neighborliness, and cooperation in all fields between Cambodia and Vietnam have been nurtured and built by generations of leaders and people who kept the best interests of both nations in mind. Over the past 5 decades, the two countries have made great achievements in the fields of friendship, solidarity, and comprehensive cooperation, particularly between the two countries' parties and governments. The National Assembly President further praised the excellent cooperation between Cambodia and Vietnamese governments in all fields, including the recent remarkable growth of bilateral trade. The two countries have successfully cooperated in the fight against COVID-19, allowing for the reopening of the country and resumption of economic and touristic activities. Darshana Gochin, EAC News.
Cambodia and Vietnam are promoting the erection of the remaining 16% of border posts left to be demarcated as soon as possible in order to stabilize the two countries' borders, transform them into a zone of peace, and to allow for further economic development. EAC News reporter Anthony Ellis has the details.
The push was made during the meeting between Prime Minister Hun Sen and the party's Central Committee Secretary of the Chairman of the Vietnam Fatherland Front Central Committee, Do Van Chien, at the Peace Palace on Friday morning. Cambodia and Vietnam have already set up at 84% of the land border by 2022. Prime Minister Hun Sen has expressed his satisfaction with the result and agreed with the Vietnamese side to set up a remaining border post as soon as possible. The Prime Minister's personal assistant, Srai Tamrong, told reporters after the meeting that the two sides agreed and urged to continue to erect the remaining 16% of the border post as soon as possible, to allow the two countries to promote peace and stability and to make it easier for all people from both countries to meet up and help each other, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, turning difficult times into potential and using all available means to expand business volume to even better. Cambodia and Vietnam have established relations since 1967, thus far lasting for 55 years. Cambodia shares a land border with Vietnam that is 1,270 kilometres long. The process is to demarcate the border between the two countries between 2006. Prime Minister Hun Sen addressed the National Assembly on the 9th of August 2012 and spent more than 5 hours explaining the border issue between Cambodia and Vietnam, dating back to the French colonial period when no border posts had been erected yet and only administrative boundaries were established. He stressed that the first and foremost duty of the obligation of the royal government is to protect the country's sovereignty and territorial integrity, as well as the rights and duties of every Cambodian citizen. At the time, he said that patriotism and territory is not exclusive right for any individual or political party alone. Anthony Ellis, EAC News.
The Deputy Commander-in-Chief of the Royal Cambodian Armed Forces and the Commander of the Royal Cambodian Army, Lieutenant General Hun Manait, met with the military representatives of South Korea and the Philippines on Thursday, 28th July. The talks between the military representatives are expected to be a positive sign of further strengthening military ties between the three countries. EAC News reporter Dashana Gochin has more.
During the meeting with the counter-terrorism delegation of the Philippine Army Special Operations Command, led by Brigadier General Monico Estoesta Abang on Thursday, a joint training session was planned with the Army Special Operations Command of the Philippines in the near future. The counter-terrorism delegation of the Philippine Army Special Operations Command expressed optimism to Lieutenant General Hun Manait that the joint training plan between the two countries' armies could go smoothly due to the good training location that Cambodia's 70th Brigade has, with the right infrastructure and equipment for training. In response, Lieutenant General Hun Manait praised the achievements made in the connection between the 70th Brigade of the Cambodian Army and the Philippine Army Special Operations Command, especially in reaching an agreement on the joint training course that is scheduled to launch soon. He said, "The progress of such a relationship is a good start to the connection between the tactical units and could pave the way for further joint training sessions on an annual basis." The joint training between the forces of the 70th Brigade, the Army of the Royal Cambodian Armed Forces, and the forces of the Counter-Terrorism Battalion of the Philippine Army Special Operations Command, scheduled to run in the near future, is part of the implementation plan on the direction of the bilateral cooperation agreed upon by Lieutenant General Hun Manait with Lieutenant General Macairog Alberto and Lieutenant General Cirilito Sobejana, the former commander of the Philippine Army, in order to open the door for communication between the two countries. Also on Thursday, the new military attaché of the Republic of Korea also met with Lieutenant General Hun Manait. The South Korean ambassador to Cambodia, Park Hung-kyung, recalled Prime Minister Hun Sen's efforts to re-establish official diplomatic ties between the two countries in 1997, after being severed during the Khmer Rouge regime. He said, "Starting from this base, the cooperation between the two countries over the past 25 years has developed in all areas, including trade, investment, education, military, demining, and health." As for the military, he also noted the importance of establishing a regular dialogue mechanism to ensure the stability of relations. Lieutenant General Hun Manait spoke about the development of relations in all fields between Cambodia and South Korea and stressed the need to maintain good relations, especially cooperation in the field of the military, like between the armies of the two countries, which has achieved fruitful results in the past. He also expressed the hope that with the support of the embassy and the office of the Korean military attaché in Cambodia, relations at the military level will be further strengthened and expanded, especially through an increase of direct communication between army units. Prime Minister Hun Sen formally re-initiated relations between Cambodia and Korea in 1997. Over the past 25 years, bilateral relations between the two countries have reached a new high, with boosting trade, investment, tourism, and development assistance cooperation, which can be further seen in many fields ranging from the political to the economic. Darshana Gochan, EAC News.
And finally, the Saudi Arabian government has released designs for its futuristic linear city called The Line, which is envisioned as a vertically constructed smart city with no roads or cars, expected to run entirely on renewable energy.
The line was first announced back in 2021 by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman as part of the country's ambitious $500 billion NEOM project. The released designs of the city show that the line is planned to be 200 meters wide, 500 meters tall, and 170 kilometers long, and is expected to house around 9 million residents. The Saudi prince has said the city's vertically layered communities will challenge the traditional flat, horizontal cities and embody how urban communities will be in the future in an environment free from roads, cars, and emissions. The concept of layered communities would mean that all facilities are just a 5-minute walk away, and residents would be able to organically bump into one another while running their daily errands. The line would also feature a high-speed rail, taking only 20 minutes to go from one end of the city to the other. Plans to build the smart city in the northwest Tabuk province of Saudi Arabia have, however, been mired with controversy. Many have cast doubt on whether the project is feasible or have criticized its elitist nature, calling it a dystopian vision of future community living. Most controversially, the larger NEOM megacity project is expected to displace around 20,000 people, primarily from the Huaytat indigenous community. In 2020, a prominent Huaytat activist was arrested and imprisoned following a refusal to relocate, according to Al Jazeera. The tribe has called on the United Nations to investigate the forced displacement and abuse inflicted by the Saudi authorities, following months of alleged harassment, arrests, and abductions.
President Xi sent a blunt message on Taiwan in candid phone call with Biden. Taiwan is a part of China, and the 1.4 billion Chinese will not tolerate any challenges to the country's national sovereignty and territorial integrity, President Xi Jinping told his U.S. counterpart Joe Biden in a phone call on Thursday. Xi's warnings comes amid reports that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is preparing to visit the island next month, something Beijing has warned her against.
According to the readout, Xi also told Biden that the U.S. approach to China as the primary rival, strategic competitor, and a security challenge would be misperceiving China-U.S. relations and misreading China's development, adding that U.S. attempts at decoupling or severing supply chains in defiance of underlying laws would not help its economy, but only make the world economy more vulnerable. China and the U.S. need to uphold the international system centering on the UN and the international order underpinned by international law, said Xi, who also reiterated China's principled position on the crisis in Ukraine. The much shorter White House readout of the call did not mention Ukraine or the specifics of economic discussions, instead singling out the issues of climate change and health security. It did, however, say that the call was part of the Biden administration's efforts to maintain and deepen lines of communication between the United States and the PRC, and responsibly manage our differences and work together where interests align. When it comes to Taiwan, Biden underscored that the U.S. policy has not changed and that the U.S. strongly opposes unilateral efforts to change the status quo or undermine peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait, according to the White House. Tensions between China and the U.S. have escalated in recent weeks after reports that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi intended to take a congressional delegation to Taiwan in August. Pelosi has neither confirmed nor denied the trip. Asked about it earlier this month, Biden said the U.S. military thought it was not a good idea right now. China has grown far more powerful militarily and economically since then, and the White House says the administration has been in touch with Pelosi's office to make sure she has all the context she needs to make decisions about her travel. Since then, however, the Pentagon has reportedly developed a contingency plan to send additional ships and fighter jets to the region. Meanwhile, Chinese officials threaten the U.S. with unbearable consequences should Pelosi go forward with her visit, and some pundits even advocated attacking Taiwan in response to such a provocation. Biden stressed the importance of maintaining lines of communication on Taiwan, and the two also discussed areas where there was the potential to expand cooperation, including climate change, health security, and counter-narcotics, the official said. While highlighting Taiwan, Xi also stressed that the world's two largest economies needed to maintain communication on macroeconomic policies, global supply chains, and safeguarding global food and energy security, China's readout said. The senior U.S. official also emphasized the importance of macroeconomic coordination. Taiwan has been ruled by the nationalist Kuomintang, who found refuge on the island after losing the civil war to the communists in 1949 and leaving the mainland with U.S. help.
If it's happening and you need to know about it, you'll get it all right here. EAC News brings you updates and breaking news in English across all of our platforms and channels. The EAC News app, YouTube, Facebook, Telegram, Twitter, and our website www.eacnews.asia. Join me and the rest of the EAC News team every day on your favorite channels. EAC News, Cambodia made clear.
Thai farmers raced their water buffalo at a muddy annual race on Sunday, marking the beginning of a new rice growing period at the start of the monsoon season in a tradition that dates back to the 1800s to give thanks to the beasts of burden.
Locals and tourists flock to the races around the 200-meter-long dirt track in Mapai sub-district of Chonburi province, some 80 kilometers southeast of the capital Bangkok. This year, over 60 buffalo joined the race in what organizers hope to prolong a lost tradition.
คือปีนี้นะครับมันเป็นปีแรกของตำบลมะไผ่นะครับที่มีการจัด
This is the first attempt this year in Mapai sub-district of Chonburi to receive the tradition that had disappeared for quite some time. I personally funded this newly built racetrack, and if it's successful, we will be continuing the tradition every year from now on.
ทุกปีนะครับจะจัดเป็นประเพณีทุกปีครับสำหรับสนาม
The annual race, which sometimes also takes place after the end of the monsoon season, was paused during the coronavirus pandemic but made a return last year. Most Thai farmers no longer use water buffalo for farming, but many are still keen on keeping the animal and conserving the tradition of water buffalo racing.
And finally, this year marks the 70th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between Cambodia and Australia. One of the ways the Australian Embassy in Cambodia decided to commemorate this milestone was by partnering with and supporting the 11th Cambodia International Film Festival to celebrate both Cambodian and Australian cinema.
This year's CIFF featured a special Australian panorama, showcasing 20 films from Australia that span across the past 7 decades since diplomatic relations were established between Cambodia and Australia in 1952. According to the festival program, the 20 films in the panorama were chosen for how they reflect the huge growth and prominence of Australian cinema, especially from the 1970s onwards, and as a fascinating point of contrast with the huge growth in Cambodian cinema and creative arts in the 1960s. The Australian Panorama kicked off on 29th June with the 2012 musical comedy drama The Sapphires, directed by Wayne Blair. The film tells the story of a talented Australian Aboriginal girl group that traveled to Vietnam to entertain U.S. troops in 1968. The film is based on a 2004 stage play of the same name, which was loosely based on a real-life girl group from the 1960s. The first secretary of the Australian Embassy in Cambodia, Ben Cumming, spoke with EAC News after the opening screening at major Cineplex Eon 1 and explained why The Sapphires had been chosen to open the festival's special focus on Australian cinema.
To begin with, The Sapphires is just such a feel-good film. It's obviously got some really complex undercurrents that are important to us in terms of our Indigenous diplomacy agenda, but it's also just a really good, feel-good film that sort of showcases Australia really well. So we thought it was a perfect choice for the opening of the panorama of Australian cinema.
On why the Australian Embassy decided to use the festival to commemorate the 70th anniversary of diplomatic relations, First Secretary Cummings said it was all about celebrating cultural links between people.
Well, part of it is that we have a very strong people-to-people relationship that sort of underpins the Cambodia-Australia relationship. There's about 66,000 Australians that have Cambodian heritage, so it's about the size of Kampong Thom. We thought the film festival is a great way to sort of showcase Australian culture and to help sort of celebrate that cultural and people link that does continue to sort of bind our relationship. It has for the last 70. We would like it to for the next 70, and we think bringing people together, learning a little bit more about each other's cultures is a great way to do that.
The panorama was curated by Variety film critic, producer, and festival curator Richard Kuipers, who has been involved with CIFF since it first began and has been to every single iteration of the festival since. When choosing the 20 films, he said what he looked at most was presenting a broad cross-section of Australian cinema and Australian life, but one which could still be accessible enough for most audiences to understand.
I chose some wonderful comedies, such as Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and Malcolm, which was one of the most successful films in the program. The audience here absolutely went crazy for Malcolm. A little film from 1986. It's not the most famous Australian film ever made. In fact, a lot of people may never even have heard of Malcolm, but it's one that I just knew this film is so special. It will play here in Cambodia in 2022 and the audience will love it. And I also wanted to show some of the more dark aspects of Australian society. Films such as Wake in Fright, a film like Jeddah about Aboriginal issues 70 years ago that paint a very critical picture. And I think this is important because you need to show the aspects of the society in all its diversity to present a true picture. So that's what I was trying to do.
Other prominent titles featured in the panorama included George Miller's 1981 classic Mad Max 2, Baz Luhrmann's Strictly Ballroom, Henry Safran's Storm Boy, and Jennifer Kent's The Babadook. The 2019 film Buoyancy, which featured a Cambodian lead and was partly shot in Cambodia, was also screened. During the 6-day festival, Kuipers had one of the busiest schedules, going back and forth from different venues across Phnom Penh to introduce as many films from the panorama as possible for the audiences in attendance.
It was really important for me to introduce the films, and I introduced every single film that I possibly could, except when there was a clash, and also to watch the film with the audience. I couldn't do it every single time, but I watched a lot of films with the audience and spoke to audience members afterwards to get their reactions and get their response. And I'm really pleased with the responses that I got to the films.
The last day of the 11th CIFF on 3rd July also marked the closing screening of the Australian Special Focus program. The closing film, Lion, was personally chosen by the Australian ambassador to Cambodia, Pablo Kang. While introducing the film, Kuipers reflected briefly on the success of the Australian panorama as a whole and stated with certainty that it was the largest Australian retrospective program presented in any Southeast Asian film festival in history. The Australian ambassador to Cambodia, Pablo Kang, spoke with EAC News after the program ended about how the collaboration between the Australian Embassy and CIFF had first started.
Sure, it was actually in 2020 when the 10th edition of the Cambodian International Film Festival was launched that we started our collaboration with Cambodia. We had a couple of Australian films showing in that festival at the time, but if you recall, it was March 2020. And pretty much almost as soon as the festival started, COVID descended upon Cambodia. The government had to close cinemas, and so that was the end of that. But we had always hoped that once COVID had been brought under control, that we could do an even bigger collaboration with the Cambodian International Film Festival. And this year was the perfect timing for that, with the vaccines and the support that we've provided, other countries have provided, meaning that cinemas can open again, and that we were able to bring at least 20 Australian movies as part of a panorama of Australian cinema to Cambodia for the festival, and also to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between Australia and Cambodia.
Ambassador Kang further elaborated that the embassy's support of CIFF was also based on the belief that the foundation of any strong relationship between two countries is in the people-to-people connections, which is especially evident through arts and culture, of which film is a very big part.
Cambodia is an incredibly young society. Roughly 2/3 of the population is under 30. They love going to the movies. There's been such a great interest in all the movies shown at the festival, including the Australian movies here this week.
In addition to the Panorama program, the film festival also featured a number of other Australian touchpoints. There was the special exhibition on Australian-Cambodian film director Alison Chorn, who flew in from Adelaide to present her work in Cambodia for the first time. A special film discussion presented by veteran documentary filmmaker James Gerrand, who has been filming in Cambodia since the early 1970s, and a masterclass presentation by Richard Kuipers on the 120-year history of Australian cinema. The Cambodia International Film Festival returned for its 11th edition in 2022 after a 2-year pandemic-induced hiatus. The festival was held from 28th June to 3rd July at various venues across Phnom Penh, featuring 144 films from 26 countries and 36 additional events, including masterclasses, cinema talks, and discussions.
Thanks for watching the weekly Roundup here on EAC News Channel. More from EAC News team in the daily Roundup Monday night at 8 p.m. See you then.